Hello everybody, how's it going? In today's video, I will be reviewing Resident Evil Village. I will admit that I have not played a Resident Evil game before, so I might have a different view upon certain aspects of this game. But without spoiling more, let's get into the review. The gameplay is a mix of both good and bad. As a first-time Resident Evil player, I thought that this felt like a fresh gameplay experience, which is very good. However, just because the gameplay experience was fresh, doesn't mean it was perfect, and that comes to my first point, and that is the fact that the boss fights are not really that good. The only two boss fights that I actually really did enjoy was the one with Lady Dimitrescu as well as Heisenberg. I like them both based purely off of their spectacle, rather than the actual fight itself. What I mean by this is the fact that in the first fight scene with Lady Dimitrescu, she turns into this vampire-like dragon, and it's a very suspenseful fight because you're fighting a literal dragon, and it could be quite scary considering you only have a pistol and a shotgun on hand. This comes back to what I said about saying that the spectacle was great, but the gameplay wasn't, because I was able to easily dodge the dragon, and it got kind of repetitive just shooting the dragon over and over again with a pistol, and not having to do anything creative to defeat the boss. However, with Heisenberg it was different, and I feel like he was the only boss battle that was actually good. I enjoyed it because he turned into a big monster, and it was quite this spectacle, as well as the fact that you were in this armored tank that was armed with a rocket launcher, chainsaws, as well as a machine gun, and this added a unique twist to the boss battle. This is why I enjoyed this boss battle the most, just because it was the most creative. Otherwise, every single boss battle had the same gameplay loop, where you had to block something, then you shoot them, block, shoot, and do that over and over again, and I just wish they were more different stages to each boss battle. In no way am I saying that the boss battles were not fun, because they were a lot of fun, but I just wish that the boss fights were more creative. Another big aspect of this game was the puzzles. I was actually quite interested in the puzzles before I started playing the game, but as I was playing the game I found that the puzzles were too easy to solve. Admittedly, there were a few puzzles that did make me think, but for the most part it was really easy to figure them out. This is my first Resident Evil game, so I'm not sure how challenging the puzzles actually are, but in this game they are too easy. Obviously, another big part of this game are the weapons that you use. Before I go any further with this, I want to mention that I played this game on easy, so some of the issues that I may have run into might have been just because of this. I survived most of the game with just a shotgun, handgun, and a pipe bomb. This is a problem for me, because there are so many other weapons in this game, and it just feels like a big waste to have all these weapons and yet not have a need for them, because you'll be able to upgrade the weapons you have from the very beginning of the game and be able to defeat every single enemy within the game itself. The only really different weapon that I used was the Wolfspeed Magnum. This gun was really helpful against the Volkalak, which are types of enemies that resemble werewolves, and I was able to kill them with one shot, so I knew this weapon would be very handy. The reason why I bring this weapon up is because of the fact that there should have been more weapons like this. What I mean is that let's say you had a normal enemy that you would just use a handgun on. Then you would use the shotgun for tougher enemies and so on and so forth. I understand it may seem like some of these weapons in the game are designed for that, but they don't specifically tell you this. And I'm not saying that they should have specifically told you, but you should notice that gameplay difference because of the weapon that you were using. I just never saw a use for the other weapons in any of the other situations, and that is quite disappointing because I would have liked to really use those weapons, but I just didn't see any need for them. There is also this merchant in the game that you run into every once in a while, and his name is the Duke. You can buy some weapons from the Duke as well as ammo and more space for your inventory. After some boss battles as well as defeating certain enemies, they will drop certain things that you will be able to sell to the Duke. Some of these things that you sell to him can give you a lot of money, but I did notice that a lot of the upgrades did get quite expensive pretty fast, which adds an extra bit of resource management to the game, meaning that you have to think about what you purchase before purchasing it. These upgrades do make a significant difference in gameplay, and I would highly suggest upgrading your weapons as much as possible. You can also sell different types of meats to the dupe as well, and this will give you upgrades to your health, as well as blocking power and stuff like that. Let's talk about one of the main aspects of this game, and that is the horror. I'm not really into horror games just because admittedly, I'm terrified of horror, so this game was a big step for me. Setting aside my personal thoughts on horror, I thought that the horror aspect of this game was done very well. For instance, at the beginning of the game when you first come up on this village, it feels so weird because it's early in the morning, and you know something is following you, but you don't know what it is. Also, going through all of the homes, you would hear creaking and rumbling all around the area, and you just never knew if something was going to pop up or not, and that gives you a real sense of psychological horror. Just having a sense of fear makes this game a lot better, just because you're always on edge no matter where you are. Just to add to the horror elements, you also have very limited ammo throughout the entire game, until you get enough money of course. I bring this up because this also adds to the horror element, because a lot of the enemies are tough in this game, and being low on ammo adds this stress. Because if you run out of ammo, it's going to be very hard to take out the enemies. The scariest part about this game was in the house of Donna Beneviento. Let me tell you, I was not prepared for the amount of stress that I was about to go through. This part of the game specifically shows just how good the horror was in this game. Going through the dark halls and seeing a mannequin based off of your wife is freaky. And then once you figure out certain puzzles, the power goes out and you're stuck in the pitch black. Suddenly you're being chased by a giant fetus, and this is the most horrifying thing I've ever experienced in a video game. It makes it worse when you realize that you don't have any weapons to defend yourself, so all you have are a couple of hiding spots and your will to run. I gotta hand it to the developers as well as the storytellers of this game, because they did a fantastic job at really giving you the feeling of fear. I don't know how much of an issue this is for other people, but I myself noticed it in this game. The problem I have is the fact that you can't go back to key locations within the game. For instance, after defeating Lady Dimitrescu, you can't go back into the castle. This bothers me because the castle is still fully intact, and there are some spots in the castle that I have not searched through entirely, and as well as the fact that I wanted to roam the castle without the fear of being attacked. That's for the castle, but for something like Heisenberg's factory, it's fine that I can't go back into it because it was destroyed. It just makes more sense to be able to go back into the castle because it's fully intact. However, it also makes sense that you can't go back into the factory because it was destroyed. Speaking of the key locations of the map, let's talk about the map itself. Most of the map at the beginning of the game is heavily closed off, but as you go through the game you find certain keys. With these keys you will be able to unlock certain gates, as well as doors so you can unlock shortcuts, as well as gain access to new areas of the map. I think this is a great way to explore the map, because then it gives you more of a reason to continue on with this game. If you want to see one area of the map, you can't get to that part of the map until later on in the game, which means that you will play the game for longer. As part of the map, there are multiple areas that just look incredible. As someone who's playing on the PS5, I have to say that with ray tracing on and everything in between, it just looks fantastic. I especially love the way the inside of the castle looks, just with the shine of the flooring, as well as the lighting and just overall atmosphere. The castle feels insane. This is definitely one of the better looking games that I have played. There are some frame stuttering moments in this game, but they are very infrequent, and they usually happen if you're on top of a building looking at the entire map or something. But otherwise, the game runs at a smooth 60 FPS. After the game is finished, you get access to some extra content where you can unlock concept art as well as model views, and you get to purchase certain items for your next playthrough. I also really like the concept art because they have developer notes with them, which means that you'll be able to get a backstory as to why they made certain decisions and what was cut from the game. I know this might not seem like a big deal to some people, but for me I just love seeing the development cycle and why things are the way they are. So let's get to the final aspect of this game, and that is the story. One thing I will say for sure is the fact that you will need to play Resident Evil 7 to understand certain references to certain events. As someone who has not played any Resident Evil game, I will say that some parts are a little confusing, so I would suggest playing RE7 first. They do have a little recap at the beginning, but that still feels like it isn't enough explanation as to what happened. For me, the story was just okay. It wasn't the best I've ever seen, but it most definitely wasn't the worst. So the basis for the story is the fact that your baby is kidnapped by Chris Redfield, and you have to find your daughter Rose. While being transported to a facility, the vehicle you are in crashes and you are left stranded in a village. This village is the place where your daughter is being held, and you must figure out how to save her. You then figure out that she's in a bunch of capsules, and you need to find 4 of these capsules, each held by 4 of the main villains in the game that are named Alcina Dimitrescu, Salvatore Moreau, Donna Beneviento, as well as Carl Heisenberg. Before killing Heisenberg, Chris Redfield explains to Ethan Hunt that his wife Mia was never killed, and that the mother Miranda was her all along, and was the one that kidnapped the baby in order to resurrect her daughter from years ago. After this, Ethan kills Mother Miranda and sacrifices himself in order to destroy the village. Now that is a very short summary of what happened during the game, and I hope I explained it properly. I do have a few problems with the story, one of them being the fact that we don't get enough of Dimitrescu. Throughout the entirety of Resident Evil Village's marketing, we were always shown Lady Dimitrescu. This made me think that she was the main villain of the game, but only to realize that she's barely in the game at all, and that's quite disappointing. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it was false advertising, but it was quite disappointing because they put so much thought into her in the marketing that we expected her to be a more prominent figure within the game, but only for her to be the first villain that really wasn't all that hard to kill in the end. My other issue with the story is that towards the very end, the story does seem to fall off the cliff for me. It gets all weird when Ethan Hunt gets killed, and then we are suddenly shoved into a sequence where we play as Chris and hunt down and plan to nuke under the village. I really did enjoy this part of the game, but it didn't feel like it was part of the same game. It gets really weird again when we are transported back into Ethan's body, and he's told that he's actually dead, and then we go and kill Mother Miranda and destroy the village. For me, this just felt really weird, because I wish we didn't have that nightmare sequence. And as hard as it is to say, I also wish we didn't get that sequence with Chris, because it did not feel like it was part of the same game. Anyways, as a first-time Resident Evil player, I would say that this game left a good impression on me. I will admit that I'm not a huge horror fan, and I also admit that this game did scare me quite a lot, but it did not deter me from finishing the game, and I think that just proves that this game is pretty good. There were aspects of the gameplay that didn't sit well with me. For instance, the easy to solve puzzles, variety of weapons, as well as the fact that the game did feel a little bit too easy, even on the easy difficulty. The horror element was done perfectly, and I would highly suggest this game to anybody who is a horror fan. Thank you all so much for watching my review for Resident Evil Village. If you want to see more reviews like this, then please consider liking and subscribing. Also, if you want to let me know what you thought about this game, then please don't hesitate to comment down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and see you in the next review.